The Pietermaritzburg High Court has reserved judgment in an application brought by French company Talis to have corruption charges against it dropped. Talis and former President Jacob Zuma face charges of fraud, corruption, money laundering and racketeering relating to the 1999 arms deal. Earlier today, the court dismissed Zuma's leave to appeal after failing in his second bid to remove prosecutor Billy Downer, or to have him removed from the trial. Let's get an update now from Ziyanda Ngcobo, who attended proceedings today. A very good afternoon to you, Ziyanda. Have the former president's people had any response or comments with respect to what some people would consider to be a blow?
Well, not at the moment because judgment is reserved, so there's not much to say at this stage except to have monitored the oral arguments. In fact, former President Jacob Zuma wasn't even in court when the second half of those arguments were being made because he was addressing a crowd outside alongside the National High Command of the Umkhonto we Sizwe Party. At this stage, a holding date of the 3rd of June has been put in place for Judge Nkosinathi to hand down his judgment when it comes to this matter. Of course, you'll know that Thales had filed an application to have a permanent stay of prosecution. They've argued that the two representatives of the arms manufacturer in that 10-year period, which the state is alleging was the time within which the corruption took place, those two witnesses, Moynot and Tatard, have since passed away. But responding to that, the state said, well, had former President Jacob Zuma not resorted to all those delays, by 2019, the matter would have been concluded when it returned to the High Court. But let's bring in NPA spokesperson Newzroom because in the first instance, we heard Judge Nkosinathi in the morning dismissing former President Jacob Zuma's leave to appeal, his second bid to have Billy Downer removed, and now we understand that they intend to petition the Supreme Court of Appeal, yet they've done this before.
It's quite disturbing that we've got an instance where the highest court in the land, which is the Constitutional Court, has pronounced on the matter. They brought it again without bringing in any new grounds or new argument, rehashing the same grounds that they relied upon in the last application that was dismissed by the Constitutional Court. And there's an intimation now that they lost, that they might even approach the Supreme Court of Appeal again, following the same route. And obviously there's been an arduous finding that they are adopting a Stalingrad tactic to unreasonably delay the matter. It's quite unfortunate. Unfortunately, that's where we are.
And I'm starting off there because now that the holding date of the 3rd of June has been put in place, it means these matters will run concurrently. And if they do then petition the Supreme Court of Appeal, it will have a direct impact on this trial again.
Sadly, that's where we are, and that's in the nature of Mr. Zuma's litigation strategy, which in all likelihood, there's just no intention of seeing this first witness take the witness stand. We're hoping that the matter could be expedited by the SCA when the appeal processes unfold. However, we put up a very strong argument today to say even the Thales application had been dismissed, albeit being a permanent stay of prosecution. Now they are bringing it in terms of Section 6B of the Criminal Procedure Act being a stopping of the prosecution. But it has the same effect in that they want the charges or the prosecution stopped. We put up a very good argument to say it's a matter that has been pronounced upon. It was dismissed by the full court in 2019. Even when they made reference to the two witnesses having passed on, I said it has no bearing on the defense that they need to put forward because they've got other witnesses that can still present. And as such, their argument that it will be prejudicial to them and may encroach on their right to fair trial is not substantive and is baseless.
But they retorted back and they said, well, you know, Moinot and Teta, the two deceased who are witnesses, were also their representatives here in South Africa and would have been able to testify testify towards the effect that these instructions to solicit these bribes would have come from Mr. Zuma himself, and that you know, if now they are now deceased, they can't speak on that. And in fact, the state, you can't say that we must call Mr. Sheikh, because if we're dealing with common purpose, it's a two-way street. So we already know what Mr. Sheikh will say.
They made the bed, they must lie on it. Because had it not been for these interlocutory applications that have been dismissed by every trier of fact, every presiding officer wouldn't be where we are. That is a matter that will be ventilated by a proper court when the trial resumes. They must allow us to put our witnesses in the witness box, test the veracity of the allegation, let all those issues play out in a trial.
Just very quickly, I'm out of time, but what options are on the table here? You know, there is the law and then there's the public perception to say, but this has been going on for too long. What sort of options are on the table from the NPA side to say, let's enter into a negotiation? Is that something that you, as the NPA, would consider?
Our prosecutorial strategy is to see all these issues ventilated in a full trial. There have not been any engagement that talks to possible issues of a plea bargain or anything like that. That has not been on the table.
All right, NPA spokesperson Ziyanda there reflecting on the state's arguments today, and of course a holding date for the 3rd of June has been put in place for Judge Nkosinathi to hand down the judgment after listening to the oral arguments from Thales, former President Jacob Zuma's lawyers, and of course the state arguing that this matter should not be dismissed and it must continue and the trial must go ahead.
Ziyanda Ngcobo, who of course attended the proceedings today, former President Jacob Zuma never the one to take matters lying low.